It is that time of year when all of us are entering into the mindset of what are we going to do next year? So it's planning season. For many of us marketers, business owners, and entrepreneurs, it is that time where we get to consider what next year is going to bring, and also how we're going to be proactive in the way that we shape our next year's plans, not just for next year, but also then into the future. So in the episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast today, I'm joined by a man who certainly knows a little bit about planning for the future, because I'm joined by Charlie Martin, who is the founder and chief executive officer of the Anti-Greenwash Charter. And we're going to explore things that you can do if you own a business or you're marketing on behalf of a brand or product or service, the things that you can do to adopt a green claims policy. And we're going to go deep into this and the steps that you need to take and how to connect with the Anti-Greenwash Charter as we go through this conversation. But first of all, I want to understand from Charlie how he found himself in this position. So welcome to the show, Charlie.
Neil, thank you. Thank you for having me on today. Really appreciate it.
So, greenwash, we've all seen it. We've all read it. We've all possibly been, fooled by it from time to time. Why have you suddenly decided to take, or maybe it's not suddenly, but why have you decided to take this kind of mantle forward? Because we know it's a really important thing, but it's hard.
Those are some very, very fair words, Neil. I think, possibly it's one of those situations where if we'd known how difficult it was going to be, we perhaps wouldn't even have necessarily gone on the journey in the first place. But we're here now, and it's been a fascinating road that we've been on so far. To give you a bit of background, as you mentioned, sort of where did it come from? I run a marketing business called Gusto. We work predominantly in the built environment sector, specializing in working with developers, construction organizations, et cetera. But what we found was that we had, I think it was the CMA's report came out in 2021. I think it was early 2021 regarding, I think it was 40% of all sustainability related claims online being found to be misleading. And we had a couple of clients at that time, one of which that was going through B Corp certification, who came to us and said, guys, we're really concerned about the CMA's report. We want to do something to kind of get ahead of this, to essentially present our brand as being one that, is responsible when it comes to the way that we market and communicate about ourselves. And so we got our thinking caps on kind of internally for those clients and came up with the concept of, well, guys, wouldn't it be really refreshing if you were to actually share with your stakeholders all of those practices and procedures that you guys implement in order to ensure responsible marketing is kind of core and central to what you do, and ultimately therefore mitigate what you're doing to mitigate against instances of greenwashing occurring in your own, promotional and advertising campaigns. So that was the sort of the beginning, if you like, of the Anti-Greenwash Charter. And I guess from our perspective as an agency, from a Gusto point of view, it was kind of then that we really took an interest in responsible comms and greenwashing. It's been something, I think, as we found with a lot of the organizations that we're working with, it was something that we sort of just felt we'd always factored in, that, we're always looking to ensure that what we're saying is fair and substantiated, and, we've got an evidence trail to back things up. But we hadn't ever really thought about it in kind of I guess, how do we formalize and clearly detail that approach into something? And that's what we did with these couple of clients. And so we launched their green claims policies, I think, towards the back end of 2021. And we're really, both the client and ourselves, really encouraged by the kind of feedback that they got about, as a result of developing these policies and sharing these policies. It wasn't just feedback from their customer base, but it was feedback from their investors, from other kind of key stakeholders within the organization, that said it's really refreshing that we now can actually see and read what you are doing in order to ensure that you practice your marketing responsibly. So from there, we thought to ourselves, hold on a minute, we might have something here that would be applicable to obviously other clients of ours as Gusto, but equally other organizations that we haven't worked with previously. And so that's what led us to launch the Anti-Greenwash Charter as its sort of standalone entity at the beginning of 2022.
It's interesting that you use the word kind of procedure
Mm,
to kind of formalize something which I think is, well, certainly from my experience, and I'd be interested in what you think about this, but in my experience, I've noticed that quite a lot of organizations that, I sort of talk to or have a hand in, sort of, helping with marketing, etc., is that there's kind of one of two camps. You're either in the camp that it's too difficult to do. It's that kind of fear-based, if I don't look in that direction, it's not going to come and get me. So I'll kind of bury my head in the sand, and if I don't look, it'll go away kind of
mm,
camp. And then there's the other camp, which kind of says, if we do something proactively, then we'll be okay, because even if we get it wrong, at least we've been proactive. But that group, from my experience, is currently a very, very small group. Why do you think it's that people, organizations, marketers are kind of hesitant to go through this? Because, to me, it just makes logical sense. If I can put a procedure together, or let's call it a policy,
mm.
at a very, very high level, at least I've got some form of guidance. I've got a bit of a checklist. I've got something that will, sort of, stand up in a law court, and actually I could
Mm.
actually say, look, this is what we're trying to do. We're not perfect, but we're at least trying, and here's the evidence. Why do you think people are so reluctant to kind of go there? Or are they? Are you seeing a groundswell of people embracing this now?
Well, I think so, Neil. Really good question. Let me try and sort of unpick a few things in there. So, I think the first thing to say is that there's a real sort of singularity, if you like, in terms of the attitude with which organizations have engaged with us. They are all of as you alluded to, of the position that they would rather have their brand viewed as an entity that is an open book, in the sense of, we are trying our best to get to the following. We know that we are not perfect. We know that when it comes to our sustainability credentials, it is a journey, but we want to be open and honest with our stakeholders whilst going on that journey, and sharing how we go about governing our own marketing is a part of that brand positioning. So I think that's the one thing to note, is that is a commonality amongst all of our signatories and all the organizations we engage with. And actually, it's a really interesting point that you raised, because we have had conversations with people where they've said it's just too scary to get involved in doing that. We're not commercially as well positioned as maybe some of our other competitors when it comes to our sustainability journey. So we don't want to sort of, poke the bear, if you like, when it comes to sharing too much. For us, that's one way of viewing it, and perhaps not the way that we or our other signatories would view, a strong brand position. But obviously that's what other people decide to do. I think, coming into a bit more technicalities around what we're doing, it's fascinating to note that the number of organizations we're working with where our initial contact has been with the heads of sustainability or sustainability directors within organizations, and not the marketing directors. What we're finding is that it's easier for us to engage with sustainability teams with a view that they then refer us to their marketing departments to carry out as a sort of not prescribed initiative, but very much an encouraged initiative. We've had less success of engaging directly with marketing teams. And we think, and again, we haven't had this feedback, but we think that there's a potential slight concern over, well, we don't want to have a third party come in and sort of independently audit how well we are doing in terms of practice and procedure that's governing our marketing. Fair enough. But I think from a sustainability perspective and sharing that sustainability narrative, that's where it becomes an easier referral internally to the marketing team. So I don't know if that addressed your initial question, but just some interesting insights, I guess, from what we've learned so far with the signatories that we've worked with.
I was going to pick up on the competitor thing, and I want to come back to that, because that one has been going around in my world for quite some years, as to, is there competitive edge here with this thing? And I want to come back to that, but I can't leave the point that you just said there untouched, which is this question mark about certain marketers in certain organizations, and I'm going to paraphrase you here, not wanting to kind of have their marketing audited. Oh, now you've lit the blue touch paper under Neil here, because that's an interesting one. I wonder why not. It's a rhetorical question, but it's an interesting one, isn't it? If you feel as a marketer that you're doing a good job, if you're gathering analytics and all the insights for your performance of how you're doing, and you're evaluating it and you're reporting the right kind of stuff, why would you not want to be audited? So I'm kind of got a wry look on my face, because I'm thinking, hold on a minute, what is there that either you're hiding or you're not very confident about, or that you're not actually measuring at all? It feels like there's a lot of stones that need to be unturned in that kind of organization.
I can completely agree, Neil. I have to say, my gut feel is that there's a real lack of confidence. I don't think there are. I mean, yeah, there are clearly marketeers out there that are. I wouldn't say anybody's. Well, no, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit here, but I wouldn't say anybody is going out maliciously, or there would be very few organizations out there that are maliciously going out to just tell blatant lies about, you know, what their organization are doing from a green or credential or sustainability perspective. I think a lot of it comes down to a lack of confidence and also a lack of clarity. The number of organizations we work with, again, thinking about that dynamic between your sustainability team and your marketing team. Well, the reporting that goes from sustainability to marketing, there's an interpretation that the marketing function within an organization takes to the sustainability credentials and reporting that they've been shared. And that's where some issues around, well, you've taken our report and you've interpreted it in a way which now makes it unclear as to what was actually in the report initially. So you're almost sort of fabricating, or certainly embellishing, or, you know, being over optimistic with what we're sharing as a sustainability department. And that's a key issue. But I think, coming back to your point, I think it's a problem with confidence to say, we've looked at the way that we manage our marketing, we've looked at practice and procedure, and we would be comfortable with that practice and procedure holding up against, you know, third-party interrogation. And I think that's the issue that we face. It's scary to be audited. It is. It's, you know, you are going to get somebody else to go in and go, guys, why are you doing it like that? And that's scary for people.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting, this one, because I think, I mean, I've been audited. I've done Ofsted audit most recently, actually this year, through Cambridge Marketing College, and that was an interesting exercise. You have to be truly honest with yourself before you start answering questions, and, you know, really own up if it's like, there was a gap there, if there's a particular thing that you thought you were doing, but actually there's no real evidence to back it up. So yeah, it's quite curious, isn't it, that suddenly, when it's like, a little bit of a knocking the status quo potentially, then people get a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit restless in their seats. And I guess if you're not gathering evidence as you go, then understandably so. Do you think that issue that you've just identified there is because we don't really understand? If you're not in the sustainability team, or you're not a sustainability lead, as a marketer, you don't really understand what you're talking about, because there's very little kind of playbook, I call it, here. I mean, you've got things like Carbon Literacy Trust, and there's a whole bunch of other, organizations, Sustainable Compass, and, there's lots of other kind of initiatives and models beginning to emerge and gain some traction. But we don't really have this definitive kind of marketing Bible, if you like, where you can go in, you can follow the rules, and then you've done it. It's this kind of, I guess, hesitancy for the marketing sector to sort of say, look, we kind of get bits of it, but we don't really understand the full picture. Do you think that's why there is this nervousness? Because it kind of looks like that from my perspective.
And Neil, I think you've hit on some really, really important points there, and it aligns very much with I guess the experience that we've had. I think I was doing a panel discussion last week at an event at the Excel Centre, and we were talking about the key to addressing, like, how do we address greenwashing? How do we address the problem at large? And the point was made that it's just all around education. It is all about, your internal teams understanding sustainability better. It's us as consumers understanding sustainability better, and then being able to therefore join things up and make more informed decisions. So I think that's absolutely the case. I think what was fascinating for us, we did a piece of research earlier in the summer with Future Build, the building show, looking at, and it was built environment specific, but we were looking at kind of viewpoints and concerns around greenwashing throughout the kind of supply chain within the built environment. And one of the things that came out of that was fascinating was we were asking people where they had seen greenwashing. And actually and it wasn't the number one, but it was one of the noted areas that people thought they experienced greenwashing was actually within their own internal comms. So essentially that they were speaking to different departments, hearing different stories, hearing different interpretations of the sustainability credentials and green messaging for that particular organization. And our response to that was, wow, if we as an organization can't be clear on exactly what, you know, the green credential, the sustainability benefit is of that product, service, or the organization as a whole, how on earth have we got a chance of effectively being able to communicate a clear, unambiguous, and substantiated message externally? So I think that those are some key points to make. I think the final point I would make about this is that I think that that addressing this problem really becomes a cultural issue, and therefore it really comes down to leadership within organizations seeing the overzealous interpretation of sustainability credentials as a cultural thing that they need to address. And what I mean by that is that, and I'm telling you suck eggs, Neil, I know, as a fellow marketeer, but we as marketeers, we're under pressure. You know, we've got that pressure of, okay, how do we take this message and how do we present it in as an engaging a way, format, you know, etc., as possible in order to realize our outcome that we're working on, which is, you know, attention metrics of some description. As a result, if we are given a message from the sustainability team and with a lack of real clear understanding as to the parameters of that message that they deliver to us, we're then, you know, essentially tasked with trying to be creative with that. It creates a conflict at the heart of what we do as marketeers. And I think the only way we can address that is by the leadership team within an organization. Emboldening is probably the wrong word, but just, you know, ensuring that the marketing function is clear that there are no metrics that they've been tasked with. There are no, you know, performance goals that they've been set that are worth them trying to achieve as with the use of ill-informed or, you know, poorly substantiated claims around the sustainability credentials of that organization because of the potential branding issue that could come from being found to be greenwashing. So sorry, that was a bit of a mouthful, but I think that is the key, is that, you know, this is a cultural problem and an educational problem within organizations.
It's the way you've described that, I think, you know, for me is really, really clear, because I think there's something nice and actually very, very much needed emerging from all of this, which is almost like a redefinition of what we mean by the word marketing. I think for a lot of people, they understand that, you know, the full marketing mix. And I'm talking more about marcom, so marketing communications here when I say marketing. So marketing with a small m, because the word consumer that you've used there, you know, this encouragement of consumption, which I've been, you know, banging the drum now for, well, at least 12, 18 months about saying, that's an ugly word now. We shouldn't be, as marketers, you know, advocating and encouraging consumption because, well, it's just not the right thing in this emerging world in which we're living in. So therefore, is this an opportunity? I mean, maybe through something like a green claims policy or signing up with the charter, we will come on to that in a minute. Is this an opportunity to say, right, we're going to redefine how we communicate? So, you know, very eloquently you've described there the challenge internally. That has to clearly come first, so everybody's aligned. But then the external communication obviously is really, really important as well, because if what we're doing is still selling, promoting, advocating consumption, it kind of flies in the face of actually what we're trying to do here, which is, communicate the journey that we're on of providing value to people who want to listen. So to our stakeholders, customers, investors, whoever they might be. So this is a very long-winded way of asking a question, really, but do you feel that kind of redefinition of what marketing is plays into this? Because it feels very, very closely aligned, that if we say marketing is now something different, then it almost gives it permission to ease off of that hard sell and say, look, no, we're here for the good of everybody.
I 100% agree with that, Neil. I think the only challenge is that when it really comes down to, we've got senior leadership team meeting to look at, big decisions made about, the teams that they have at play, and, who's going to get more resource next year, and who's going to, who's potentially under pressure, etc. We still live in a world where those commercial metrics are going to determine the success of that marketing department. So I agree with you. I think that marketing functions are developing and evolving and having to be more sympathetic and nuanced to some of the macro issues at play. For example, the absolute brand, danger, if you like, or the major issues that can result from being found to be greenwashing. But I think it's, in my experience, I guess I don't want to be naive, I guess, when looking at this with clients, that there isn't still that pressure to take that message that's shared from the sustainability team or report or relating to, that product or service, and finding a way of being able to present it that gets the maximum amount of attention on that product or service. But obviously doing so without putting the brand into any danger of being found to be greenwashing. I think that's it. There's more considerations at play, which again is what, coming back to the point that I made about education. I think that the marketing function within organizations just needs to be much better educated on what they're actually saying. Because you've made a really good point, which is that a lot of the time, I think marketing teams get hold of sustainability or green credentials of said product or service, and they really don't know what it is that they are presenting. So I'm sorry that I slightly rambled on there, but yes, I agree that the marketing function is definitely developing, and is more nuanced. But I do think it's still at the heart of it is a commercial function. So it's how we balance those two things, I guess.
So if there is a nice kind of sweet spot, there's a mid ground here that says, okay, we need to educate. There's probably a self-education piece here so that we understand the conversation, we understand where the value is coming through here. And then on the other side, it's kind of a business as usual in terms of the role of marketing. This kind of sweet spot in the middle then is, if we could do both sides, would this become super competitive? Would this be a proposition that we're developing here that would literally, knock out the water or blow out the water any of the competition? Because if we can find this perfect mid ground, we're doing the commercials, but we're also doing something that's good for planet and community and everything else. That would seem to be the ultimate, wouldn't it?
Completely agree. And I think I think that's the thing that's striking about the organizations that we're working with as signatories of the Anti-Greenwash Charter, is that I think they all view the positioning their brand as being one that is open, honest, and transparent about the journey that they're going on, that they're not perfect, that they are striving to get better when it comes to the green or sustainability credentials relating to their product, service, or organization. That is the key point, is that you've got, and I take your point about using consumers, let's call them customers, I guess, but you've got customers or stakeholders for an entity. I think people are looking for that. People are responding well to organizations that are choosing to position themselves in that way. So I think you're absolutely right. Like that's the sweet spot. You can be confident about your product or service or organization and the way that you present it, but you can also do so with an acknowledgement, almost a humility. I think that's a key point, is like, has your organization's brand, the brand that you present, got humility at the heart of it? This is where we're good. This is where we're not so good. These are the things that we're doing to get better.
Which I guess then by default opens up an invitation for others to collaborate. So if you have people in your supply chain, or there's other organizations around your organization, and they get wind of this and they'll think, hold on, actually, we could add some value with that. So let's get in, have a conversation. It feels like that's an invitation for collaboration, which of course is at the heart of getting this right, because very few of us can actually do this in isolation. So there's a lovely honesty. I love that humility. That's nice.
And I have to say, it's one of those things, isn't it, in the commercial world, I guess, where like it's not an often used term. I think we were speaking to some clients talking about the use of the term vulnerability within a commercial kind of context, and that, I guess, is really scary for people, because the last thing that we necessarily want to do is present a vulnerability. But I think perhaps a softening of that term with the term humility and being able to present your brand as such, I think is a really strong position to find any organization in. And picking up on your point there, Neil, about the collective nature of this, I think we've obviously touched on a few of the points about the sort of micro implications or the local implications of greenwashing in terms of, the degradation of your brand and your brand's reputation as a result of greenwashing. But I think you hit upon a really interesting point, which is we need a collective of organizations and of minds, etc., to adopt this way of viewing their organization's marketing in order for us to improve collective standards and ultimately lead to better informed decisions being made by all stakeholders about the sustainability or the green credentials of that organization, service, or product, because that's the only way that we're going to make the right decisions at the right time that are going to enable us collectively to address the wider problem of climate change, etc. So I think that's the big point, is that we need this to be got right so that we can all make better informed decisions.
I'm loving the challenge of some of these very evocative words, as you say, from a commercial sense. They are not in the mainstream. Vulnerability, empathy is another good one. Humility, I love that one, because that's the kind of one that you think, well, yes, of course, we will always show humility. But you start to add in empathy, it's like, hold on a minute. And then vulnerability, it's like, really? we can't possibly be vulnerable. But again, it's about a redefinition of this, isn't there? Because the power of vulnerability is you're appealing then to the humanity in all of us, that human-centric feeling of connection and wanting to be part of something greater. You're tapping into that just by the very use of those words. I'm going to start to, I think next year, start to really push both my clients, but others that I engage with, to start to play with that. I remember when I very first used the word love in a law firm. So I was consulting with a law firm, and I said, if you really wanted to do this, if you really wanted to break away from, this real formality that your industry has, start using the word love. And they did. And they started to put people on the website. And honestly, this firm went from strength to strength. They moved from being kind of mid-tier to top tier. And whether it was just for that, I don't know. But it was a really poignant moment where you just thought, that's changed everything. And I wonder if there is this kind of tipping point that we could all go through. And, I'm often challenged, and certainly by my wife, about, you need to show more vulnerability here. You're this solid rock who just, you never show weakness and this, that, and the other. And it's like, if you showed some vulnerability, people would find that so endearing. And I know that she's right. So professionally, I can hear it and I can feel it. But it's a big old step, isn't it? And then you look at C-suite, you look at corporate table, who's going to be the first to move? But if they do, my betting, and I would put a lot of money on this, my betting would be they're going to be the winners, because Patagonia did, and look at them.
Exactly. Neil, oh yeah. And that's great you picked them out as an example. I think that you've nailed that. I think it's disarming, if I'm honest. We live, if you think about, again, sorry, I'm stepping outside my sort of area of jurisdiction here, but we look at the modern world, and it's so polarized in terms of opinion, and there's so much conflict at the heart of interpretation of saying this and doing that and being viewed this way. I think that sense of, presenting a, and I understand that there is a historical association of weakness with the term vulnerability, which is hence why we've kind of moved towards, I guess, humility as being perhaps a more accessible term for organizations that we're speaking to. But our kind of, I guess, position on it with them is that by adopting that, it is a disarming tactic for any potential concerns, if you like, raised by, the media, broader stakeholders, etc. If you've got ahead of the issue and said, look, we're going to be really open with you about how we go about structuring our marketing practice. And I'm now alluding this directly to the work that we do at the Charter, but you can see how this would be more broadly applicable across other kind of policies and procedures, et cetera, within an entity. But for us, it's about, we're going to be really upfront. We're going to share it with you. You can see that it's a work in progress. It's not perfect, but this is what we do. And I think what that then does is, as you say, it aligns closely with the humanity in all of us. It becomes very person-centric. It becomes very familiar that this entity is like me. It's not perfect, but it's trying. And I think that's a very, very strong position to find yourself in, because not only will you be potentially loved more as a brand, but it also gives you a very good position to go back to from a reputation management perspective.
So let's enable people to, if they're identifying with this, they're feeling like, yeah, it's the time. I need this in my plans for next year. Tell me more. What can they do? What is, adopting a green claims policy? What is the Charter? Kind of take us kind of a little bit step by step through kind of next steps. If this feels like a good thing to do, to find out more, to get on the journey, where do we begin?
Brilliant question, Neil. Right, let me give me the sort of the patter, if you like. So we at the Anti-Greenwash Charter, we have a 3-stage process that any organization that wants to go through this process can adopt. And so the first stage is that they apply to join the Charter. There's an application form essentially that you fill out on the homepage of the website, which is the antigreenwashcharter.com. And essentially what you do is begin by just sharing some details about your current marketing practice and procedure. So here we ask some kind of key questions about, what you're currently doing essentially. And then what that then enables us to do is to go away and just do a few checks about your suitability as an organization to join the Anti-Greenwash Charter. So you'd be amazed, actually probably you wouldn't be amazed because in the world that you're in, but we've had some very interesting names of organizations that have applied to join the Anti-Greenwash Charter. We've had to politely decline some of those applications on the basis that it wasn't really in the spirit of an Anti-Greenwash Charter for those entities to kind of move forward. But once we're happy with the suitability of the organization, they move forward into the second stage. Or should I say, sorry, during the first stage, we also check with the ASA to make sure there aren't any outstanding issues with them, with claimants made or problems with claims they've made about their green credentials. Once we're comfortable, though, they move forward into stage 2, and stage 2 is the co-creation of a green claims policy. Now, some organizations choose to create those policies sort of essentially independently of us. Others want us to be sort of far more involved and handhold them, if you like, through the process. We do have a number of kind of sections that are kind of mandated that have to be in every green claims policy. And if I was to give you kind of, I guess, a flavor as to what those things are, the first and almost a sort of a cornerstone of a green claims policy in our estimation is your glossary of key terms that you use as an organization on a regular basis to describe your sustainability credentials. So here you list all of those kind of key definitions that you use regularly. Obviously, until we have a universal glossary of terms for some of these things, that's a really important first step, so that your stakeholders at any point in time can say, right, this organization's referred to net zero or, I don't know, offsetting of some way. I want to understand exactly what definition they're using when they describe something as that. So that's a key part. Other things that are key are things like editorial process. So, written down exactly what happens before something is published, who checks what, how is it independently kind of verified internally before it goes out. Other things include like evidence and testing. So when you refer to X and Y relating to that product, like which third-party accreditations and bodies do you work with in order to verify that that is actually the case for that particular product or service? And I could go on, but essentially there are these kind of key mandated sections within a green claims policy. Once that policy has been published and we've kind of reviewed it and we're all okay and we published it, that then kicks into play a 12-month license period. And during that license period, we as the Anti-Greenwash Charter will carry out at least one independent review where essentially we will ask for the evidence from that signatory to present where they've effectively implemented all of the policies and procedures detailed in their green claims policy. So to give you an idea of what that would look like, to take the examples of what was included within the policy before, obviously we can check to make sure that the definitions detailed have been used in a particular campaign. We can make sure that you have used the terms that were detailed in your GCP. But things like the editorial process, we ask for a redacted screenshot, obviously removing any other sensitive information of maybe the Slack channel or the email thread of where the appropriate people within the organization did check the claims, etc., within that published piece. Et cetera, et cetera. And once we've received all of the evidence, we'll then review that evidence. And then one of two things happens. Either we look at it and we go, guys, we can see that you clearly implemented your green claims policy, effectively, in which case you're verified and you can therefore be a signatory of the charter for the following 12-month period. Or, guys, there are actually some problems here. We noticed that you've used a different definition in this live campaign to that you used in your green claims policy, or you failed to provide us with evidence of where you've carried out effective internal training with new members of staff on greenwashing and your adoption of your green claims policy, which again is a mandated section of it. In which case, please make these amends, and we'll carry out an additional spot check in this licensee period to make sure that you have heeded those concerns and that ultimately you can be a charter signatory moving forward. So that I've gone into some detail there, Neil, but that is the process that we offer. And I guess the key outcomes that we're able to kind of offer our clients as the Anti-Greenwash Charter is that that message that they're able to share to suggest that they have had a third party independently verify that they are practicing marketing responsibly. And that is essentially the outcome that we offer.
For me, the really positive thing about all of this is that there isn't this kind of dumbing down of who we are as a brand. So if I was, my business recommending to sign up for this, it doesn't mean then that I have to follow a definition that everybody else is going to be following. I can personalize and customize it. So this is more of a framework then than you need to do it this way. It's a kind of a self-policing, self-created, very personalized version of the charter, really. So I don't have to kind of lose anything as a business then. I can build upon it. So it's only a plus side. It's only upside by the sounds of it.
Neil, I love the fact that you've described it like that. That's brilliant to hear. We would obviously agree. I think you make a really interesting point there. It quite simply, these are, what do you as an organization want to publicly commit to that your stakeholders can review and read and go through and therefore be comfortable that as a result of implementing these practices and procedures that you are practicing marketing responsibly. That is it. We put no, pressure on what's necessarily, what your definitions are going to be or anything like that. We just guide you through that process and then ultimately verify that you are doing what you said you were going to do, which is the key point.
Which means then that even if you feel as a business you're very, very early into the game, and in fact this is literally your first step, you're as able to do this at that point as you are if you are a Patagonia, for example, and you've been doing this forever and it's actually right at the core of everything that you do. There's nobody excluded. This is a very accessible thing, isn't it?
That's a really interesting point, Neil. We've literally had organizations, we've had startup entities who have said, look, we want to start as we mean to go on. We very much see this policy as something that's going to evolve over time, which again, obviously we encourage. We encourage the policies to not only evolve in light of, sharing best practice and sharing, we share with our signatories other signatories' policies that we think are really cool, that we think have maybe gone above and beyond, and might be something that they might look to adopt. Equally, we look at kind of what's happening from a easy for me to say, a legislative perspective. For example, obviously, some of your listeners might be aware of the EU directive on green claims. That's obviously starting to have an effect. It hasn't had a direct effect. We haven't adopted all of that in the UK yet, but you can see that that's starting to affect the way that people are doing things. So these policies are evolving. And I think the point I was bringing up was that, yes, we've got startups that are kind of adopting this as just part of their practice and procedure that they want to implement from the start. But then we've also had organizations that are, been around for a long time who have actually used this. And it's fascinating. I alluded to before the kind of marketing department, sustainability department kind of dynamic that, I'll be honest, before we started the Anti-Greenwash Charter, I wasn't really aware of. I didn't understand that there was these problems around communication in lots of organizations between those two departments or groups. And what's been striking has been that organizations going through this process with us, that actually it's led to them thinking a lot about, right, how do we create like better internal processes for sharing and dissemination of information? So again, yes, we work with multiple types of entities. It really is applicable to everybody.
So what's your vision for all of this then? Where do you see this? I mean, if we were to look into the future, maybe 1 year and then say 5 years, wow, that's a long time, maybe 3. Let's come back to reality. 1 year and 3 years, how is this going to look? How is the charter going to look? How do you think the world's going to look in this regard?
It's a really good question, Neil. It's a really good question. I think to take the second part of your question as the first port of call, my sense is that brands are going to be rewarded for being, and I know we've used this term a lot, but the humility and the openness, the authenticity, if you want to call it that brands are able to present. I think those are the entities that are winning already, and I think they're going to win to an even greater extent moving forward. But we've got the client or the customer are better and better informed, and they're only going to continue to get better informed in my estimation. And therefore there is no hiding place. There is no the damage that could be done by getting this stuff wrong is going to be so much more significant, I think, as time goes on. It's already significant, but I think it will continue to get even more so. In terms of the future of the charter, we've got some really clear plans in our minds about how we go about evolving from here. And it really centers around developing a real-time analysis that we're able to offer to our signatories regarding how responsible their marketing practice is currently. We, at the moment, a lot of what we do is very manual. It's very much kind of evidence gathering based, but it's all very sort of human centric. We're looking at developing a software solution currently that will enable us to have kind of dashboard areas where our signatories would be able to log in and see kind of a real-time score relating to how well they're implementing their green claims policy, practice and procedures, how well aligned their use of definitions are to those that are detailed in their glossary of key terms. That's where we want to get to, so that we're providing senior leadership, but also their internal marketing, sustainability teams, etc., with this kind of feedback to say, look, guys, we're able to provide you with up-to-date clarity on how well you're doing when it comes to, I guess, fair and accurate dissemination of information, which is, I guess, the thing that we're practicing in.
Brilliant. Feels like a good future. It feels like this is something, if you're not already putting this into your plans, this is the moment to do it. It's really accessible wherever you are. And whatever kind of industry you're in, yes, the built environment clearly is where, Charlie and the team have kind of, tested this out for you so that this works. And that is a critical kind of industry, is almost sort of leading the way in lots of ways for getting it right, because they are consuming and they are building and creating. So, as a testing ground, that's incredible. So, yeah, it's been really good to see it, very robust and, well created there. So how do people get in contact then, Charlie? Where should we be directing them? And I can put these links into the description.
Fantastic, Neil. So it is. So the website is the best place to go to. The website's on at anti-greenwashcharter.com. So that was anti-greenwashcharter.com. And from there, there's all the information that people need, hopefully, that aligns pretty closely with what I've gone through today. And then there's the marketing practice questionnaire that I alluded to before, that anyone that's interested in taking that first step can complete. I should say as well that I'm very open to having conversations with people directly if they would like to reach out and speak to me. Again, there are details of how to get in touch with us via email, etc., on the Charter website as well.
This has been really, really pertinent, timely, and so informative, Charlie. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. And I just think the timing, I've said this a number of times, but the timing is absolutely now. This is not something that you should all be putting off until next year. You need to be doing this right here, right now. Charlie, thank you so much for your time and for sharing, what is a really, really important crusade. I can only say thank you on behalf of everyone, really, the efforts and energies that you're putting into this, you and the team, because it is so valuable, the work that you're doing.
Neil, that's very kind of you to say. It's as you well know, in startup land, at embryonic stages of things, it's always really encouraging to hear that kind of feedback. So thank you, and thank you for having me on and for asking lots of nice questions. It was good. Thank you.